Chris, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here, Tiffany.
So, I'm super excited for this episode because I know enough to be dangerous when it comes to infinite banking and cash flow and all that. I am going to approach this episode so that everyone knows, being in the seat of the majority of the audience that listens to our podcast. And then I'm going to ask some questions on my own behalf as we go through. Is that cool?
That sounds great.
Awesome. What I want is for someone hearing the term infinite banking for the first time ever, can you explain exactly what it means and what they should understand about the overall concept of it?
Yeah, infinite banking really is a strategy to keep flowing your money through, right? Which us as investors kind of already do naturally anyways, right? It's how we keep our money moving, because it's not about parking your money. You hear the whole set and forget it, from the traditional financial advisors and stuff. You just park it in one place, let it sit there forever. It collects dust, and eventually you might use it in that twilight of retirement, But that's not what this is. This is about how we keep moving money through to pick up more dollars along the way.
So what problem does infinite banking solve, essentially?
Really what it does
is it gives you more control, or?
Yeah, all the above. I mean, really what it solves is help to pick up more money faster, right? And so when you hear most people talk about infinite banking, and I'll tell you, I never knew about what it was before. I actually started out as a financial advisor over 20 years ago. I was the guy that was a salesman in a suit, told you to buy mutual funds and all that kind of stuff, right? And I was the guy that told you to set it and forget it. It wasn't until, though, that when I sat down with my dad after 4 years of being an advisor, and my dad, 61 years old, super saver, right? Like, this guy was like the penny pinching guy that bought everything at Case Lot. I mean, he's the guy that bought Cap'n Crunch that I ate for entire years straight because it was on sale, right? That kind of guy. And so this guy, when he said, hey, I want to do I want to figure out how to retire because this job is literally killing me. I've had strokes and heart attacks by my 50s. I want out. He was 61 years old at this point. And so I sat down with him, looked at his numbers. He packed money in his 401k like every good boy and good girl should, right? He paid off all of his debt early, including his house. So he was 100% debt free. Like Dave Ramsey would have said, that's the guy I want to grow up to be like, And then all of a sudden I looked at his number and I said, Dad, if you want to retire today, you're going to have to die in about 5 or 6 years because that's when you'll run out of money. I said, well, that's not what I want to hear, Mr. Sunshine. Like, what do I do with this? Like, how can I get out of it? I'm like, I don't know. Save more, just work longer. And so he did. He worked into his 70s. And that bothered me so badly that just a month later, I'm talking with a friend who I trained to be an advisor. But then he quit to go do real estate investing. He was flipping properties, right? And we're talking about stuff and we're arguing about what's better, stocks or real estate. And he finally just stops. He says, Chris, how many of your clients are actually financially free where they don't worry about money? And I said, well,
question.
I don't know. I mean, none of them, because they all, even the retired ones, still watch CNN. And if you watch CNN, you're never going to feel free, right? You're going to feel panicked all the time. So I said, none. Even the retired doctors, I don't think they're really free. He's like, all right, great. Good job, Chris. How about this? How many of you guys as financial advisors are financially free, not off the commissions you're earning, but actually doing these same investments? I said, well, there's guys who've been working here since the 1970s. This is back in the end of 2005. Like, there's guys working here since the 1970s, and they don't seem like they can quit anytime soon, so maybe none. There's your problem. And so he got me open. He got me to read a book called Who Took My Money by Robert Kiyosaki, kind of a lesser-known Rich Dad series. And then listen to this show that had all these real estate investors on it. And that's what I did. And this is back in the AM talk radio days, right? So I was listening to AM talk radio 2 hours every morning. And pretty soon I realized I couldn't stay as a financial advisor, so I quit. And as I quit, I started, I wanted to know what these guys knew. And I just vowed I'd never teach about money. I would just be a mortgage broker, because in 2006, anybody could be a mortgage broker. It's kind of like 2022. And then I can also, do like a little bit of stock trading on the side and teach ballroom dancing. And so that's what I was doing in 2006. But I wanted to know what these real estate guys knew. And so I started to learn more about what they were doing. I even converted my starter home into a rental and moved out. Actually, I sold to an investor and flipped it, and then pulled all the equity out and then rented it out, like leased it, then subleased it, all that kind of stuff, right? Well, during that time, I started hearing about infinite banking. Never heard of it before. And all these real estate investors are like, it's amazing. It's awesome. Well, I find out it's with life insurance. And this is the thing that's kind of confusing, because people are like, wait a minute, is infinite banking life insurance? What kind of life insurance? Well, it's not about the life insurance necessarily. It's about the strategy of moving money through. Well, what these guys are doing is they're building up these policies, building up the cash that's inside them, because it's not the death benefit that everybody focuses on as much, although these guys were. but it's more about the cash, the tax-free savings account that's in there. Specifically with whole life insurance. When people say universal life, that's because TikTok and Instagram's trying to make it popular, but it was never meant for universal life. It actually doesn't work with universal life. But with whole life insurance,
what is the difference?
The difference is this, is that universal life is basically buy term, invest the difference. It gets more expensive over time. Whole life gets cheaper over time. Also, the other big difference is that universal life has what's called surrender fees. So say, for example, you put money in this, and that's the thing. Part of the money goes to death benefit. Part of it goes in this tax-free savings account that you can actually access. But when you have universal life, they have what are called these surrender fees, which in the early years, they lock up that cash. So you're not liquid. You don't have access to that money. It's supposed to be in there, supposedly, but you don't have access to it. In the meantime, if the stock market happens to not perform well, then you may not earn very much interest or any at all. So there's a lot of uncertainties with this, plus it's locked up. Where with whole life insurance, it's not tied to the stock market, and it doesn't have any of those fees. So the money's freed up. The problem is when I bought the policy, the whole life policy, this is the critique of whole life insurance, is that it's expensive, right? So is universal life too. But with whole life, the thing is I would pay in those first 2 years, everything was going to pay for those insurance costs. I asked the agent up front because I had a life insurance license too at the time. And I said, hey, are there levers I can pull? Because I used to sell universal life before and other mutual funds and whatnot. And so I asked him, like, can I pull different levers to get more cash in this thing? And he said, no, if you do, you're going to get taxed. So I just said, okay, I'll take your word for it. 2008 hits. I went from basically like asset millionaire to upside down millionaire. I was over $1 million in debt. Because my real estate was tanking. I had started a new business in 2007 to teach people how to get out of the rat race. And here I am back in it, right? So I'm a total fraud at this point. And I'm going broke. And I couldn't afford to keep paying the premiums. And I lost the policy. I paid $25,000 into that policy and lost it. It was the biggest waste of money ever. I found out just months later that the agent lied to me. There were levers I could have actually pulled to make it cheaper on the cost side, so then more of my cash goes in. So I'll give you an example, because you can contribute whatever you want into these kind of plans, and we do it a little bit differently because I brought it in-house. Eventually, I started figuring out the last 18 years how to do it right. But I found out you could get more cash in it. I even argued with this guy. I sat down in his office for 2 hours, debated him, showing him by the numbers how I could beat all of his policies that he set up on me and everybody else, including my friends and family that referred to him. And finally, he just told me, he's like, Chris, I set it up that way because I couldn't afford to cut my commissions. I'm like, well, there's the truth. So over the last 18 years, I figured out how to do it. I started referring out to different guys, but I could never find somebody consistently to do it. So I brought it in-house in 2017 for us to do it ourselves, to design them and set them up. And here's what I found out is that I can make them way more cash rich. Because here's what happens. If somebody puts in, I'll give you an example. There's this guy, this insurance agent that's reached out to me. He said, hey, this woman, this kind of, I'm hoping to make her a new client. She bought this whole life policy. I know you've worked with this company before. Do you know if this could be done better? This was a neurosurgeon. She was putting in $60,000 a year into this policy. Year one, she puts in $60,000, zero in that tax-free savings account. They call it cash value, right? So zero, all of it to insurance costs. Year two, she puts in 60 more grand, still zero. So she's put in 120 grand for the first 2 years, and there's still everything's going to pay for this insurance cost, which, by the way, is where the agents pay their commissions. Year three, she puts in 60 grand. She has whopping 30 grand now. So she's put in 180 grand to have 30 grand. I showed him, I said, hey, this is the same company. I'll do the same thing, but watch this. Year one, 50 grand, not zero. Year two, 108 grand, not zero. Year three, 168 grand, not zero. And so I showed him, I was like, look, she's literally overpaying by almost 140,000 extra in fees that she doesn't need to be paying. And kind of pissed her off, needless to say, right? And so that tax-free savings account for real estate investors is key. Because I know most of the people I talk to, especially in the masterminds and things that we're in, they want the death benefit, sure, but it's not that big of a deal. They want that cash because it's that cash that they can use. Because here's the important thing to understand about this cash. And Tiffany, I know I'm kind of answering your question a long way, but I know you're going to ask these questions anyways. So this cash, right? Like I said, it's a tax-free savings account. It's like a Roth. You put it in after-tax dollars, grows tax-free, comes out tax-free, but you don't have to wait till you're 59 and a half. You can access that money in the first month. So from my situation, especially as an investor, because I'm an investor first and foremost, then business owner second. Well, the thing I do with this is that I first and foremost put almost all, I'd say about 3/4 of my liquid cash here. Why? Because at the bank, we all know the banks love to pay us lots of money. They pay me point nothing percent. I mean, even the high yield savings account, I might make 3.5%. I can do a CD, but they're going down to like 4+% right now. But I get taxed on that money. But here I can store my money. It's right now paying me 6% a year tax free, not tied to stock markets or anything like that. It's guaranteed. So I'm making money in here. It's tax free, growing much faster than I would in my savings account, and I can still access it whenever I want. But here's the key thing for real estate investors, especially, is that 100% of this money in most states in the United States, 100% of this money is protected from lawsuits and creditors. It's one of the only places you can store money where somebody sues you and wins and they still can't get to it. You keep your money in any kind of savings, it's gone. They can take a lien and pull that out. They can put a lien on your house, as you well know, right? I mean, they can do all those kind of things, but this is money they cannot legally touch. So as a result, this is why I put the lion's share of my cash here. I still keep a little bit in the bank to go grab same day because it might take anywhere from a few days to a week for it to transfer to my account from my life insurance. So for that reason, I'll keep some money in the local banks. But for the most part, I keep my money there. But here's the part.
So when you take the money out, is it only the principal or like what are the rules?
Yeah. So you can access about 95% of whatever's in there. Think of it almost like a 95% LTV, right? You can withdraw the money
when you take it out.
It depends. You can take it out one of two ways. You can either withdraw it, just like you would a savings account, or you can borrow against it. And what they do there is that the insurance company, because they know it's guaranteed, they're willing to give you a 95% line of credit against that cash. There is no minimum monthly payment. You pay it back whenever you want. The deadline for paying back those loans is your death. And so if, say, for example, you have this $2 million death benefit, you took a $500,000 of that money from loans. Well, when you die, they'll get their $500,000 back, but then your family gets $1.5 million tax free, right? So that money really is, you can pay it back, of course. And that's the way that's often recommended in infinite banking, to flow the money through. And I'll explain why in a second. But that's why there's two ways. You can withdraw it or you can borrow against it. The reason why most people borrow against it, and you can even do it through certain banks. There are banks that will do lines of credit as well. Same kind of terms, no monthly payment required, especially if you want. This is kind of a good alternative sometimes to hard money, because if you don't want to have to pay that hard money, but you want to be able to leverage your cash, this is a way to do it. Now, if you borrow it, the reason that there's a lie out there, people will say that you pay yourself back interest, right? I hear a lot of these guys, the infinite banking space, even the real estate space, say this about it. It's a lie. You do not pay yourself back interest. You are literally being charged interest. Just as if you went to a bank right now, if you got money sitting in savings, you can literally walk into your bank and say, listen, can I get this secured line of credit against my savings account? And they'll say yes. Now, their spread is going to be bigger than what you get with life insurance, but they're going to charge you an interest rate compared to what they're paying you. Now, they're going to still be paying you on that money, but they're going to lock up that money. So if you take out that line of credit, say you take out the full line of credit, they will lock up your savings account. As you pay down your line of credit in your bank savings account, as you pay it down, then they start freeing up the cash that you can access in your savings account too. Why? Because the banks want to make sure that at any point, if you stop paying the monthly payments, because if you do this with your savings account, they will require monthly payments. If you stop paying, they can just pull all the money out of your savings account and then the loan's paid off. And so that's how they make sure they get their payments. Life insurance is similar. It's almost like a HELOC, but it pays you interest, right? Because they're paying you at 5-6+% interest every year on your money. But on the other side, they're going to be charging you roughly about the same interest. So the spread's much smaller, if at all. The cool thing is that they're paying you in your account compounding interest while you pay back the loan, if you want to pay it back, with simple interest. So for example, say you have $100,000 in this account, you decide to borrow $50,000. Your $100,000 is still in there earning like 6% tax free. You borrow $50,000 from them, from their pocket. You pay them back the interest, but again, you don't have the monthly payments. Now, if you never pay towards it, it will compound interest and it'll be a race of compounding interest. But say you put that $50,000 into a deal, you make your money, you do your flip, or if you're just earning interest on it or whatever you're doing with it, right? You could be even investing in your business, then you get to write off the interest. It's kind of cool. But you take that money you're earning and using that to pay back towards the loan. You pay back towards a loan to keep the interest from accumulating. You pay back simple interest, just like a mortgage or any other kind of loan. So the interest you're paying goes down, while the compounding interest they pay you goes up. And this is where you make a spread. And this is where infinite banking accelerates, because now you pick up extra interest dollars from what the insurance company pays you, because you make net insurance above and beyond what you're paying them.
The spread.
The spread, they might be paying, the interest rate might be a little bit more, like maybe 0.5% or so more than what they're charging you is 0.5% more than what they're paying you. But if you pay towards a line of credit, as you pay the interest, they're compounding, you still win. That's one thing I show people a lot of times, like why they don't pay off their 30-year mortgage. Because you can, even if your mortgage is at a 3% rate right now, you'll have to earn about a 1.3% compounded rate of that same money to pay off your loan to be able to match the interest rate. Because compounding interest grows faster than simple interest, which goes down over time. So that's the trick. It's the same thing I learned with the mortgage industry, which is, I don't want to pay off my mortgage. I don't even have to beat or match the mortgage rate. I just have to at least earn over about half what the mortgage rate is to be able to beat it with compounding interest. Same thing happens over here at this account, because the spread is so small, you're able to make way more compounding interest. So I show an example a lot of times in my presentation where if somebody has say they want to buy a $1 million little small multifamily property, and you put $250,000 down. If you use your own cash, and let's say it cash flows $2,500 a month. I mean, nowadays that'd be pretty tough, but let's just say it does. Well, if that $2,500 you drain your savings account, you pay back in your savings account, you're now building back from zero. It slowly grows, but you're getting paid almost nothing in interest from your bank, right? Let's say it's 0.1%. Well, after you get taxed over 9 years of being taxed on that 0.1%, putting in $2,500 a month of $30,000 a year, you only make about $1,200 in interest. That's what you net from the bank. But using that same strategy, using my life insurance, I actually use my own policy as the actual reality. With my own policy, despite insurance costs still coming out, even though they're not much once you get past the first few years, and despite the fact that I'm being charged interest, because I'm taking that cash flow and paying back towards the line of credit, paying it down, principal and interest, what happens is I get charged less and less interest. And as a result, I actually net about $126,000 over that same 9 years versus making $1,200. And that's the real magic, that once real estate investors get it, they're like, oh, this is a no-brainer. I mean, regardless of the asset protection piece, which is huge for a lot of people, but the fact that I know a lot of guys that just don't trust banks right now. I remember being one of the mastermind groups we're in, and we had a breakout room, and one of the real estate investors, he owns a turnkey company, and he's like, man, Chase banks treat me like crap. I've got millions sitting with them right now. They're not giving me the time of day. Plus, they're paying me nothing on this money. He's like, well, where should I put it? And everybody has their own ideas. Like, you should do an IRA or self-directed or all that kind of crap. I'm like, and I said, man, listen, you already know, because him and I are already friends. He's already a client of mine by this point. And I said, you already know where to put this money. He's like, oh yeah, you're right. I already have one of these. Let me get a second one. And so he set up a second one as well, just to get money away from the bank. I kind of call it unbanking yourself.
So who is a good avatar to use it? Like, is there a certain net worth before you really tap into it?
Not really. It's as long as you're saving at least 5-10 grand a year, if you can put away. Now, if you're paycheck to paycheck, not a good fit. Just buy cheap term, you can convert to this later on. Also, if you're over the age of 70 or in bad health, this probably wouldn't be a good fit. But if you're saving at least 10 grand that you're got in profit, right? Whether you're from your business and or personal, that's probably about a good time to start using it, right? Especially when you're supposed to be building up and capturing those profits, like profit first. We have some friends in that space that love using this strategy for their profit first accounts.
I know the wealthy use leverage, and I've struggled with this because I grew up in a family of financial advisors and insurance owners and, a ton of business owners that, the Dave Ramsey, and they're like, they literally owe no debt. They pay for everything in cash. Like, there's zero worries throughout my whole family. Mm-hmm. And so I battle with this because I come from an industry where leverage is positive. And I firmly believe in leverage, right? Like, I went into debt to start my company, and I wouldn't be here today or impacting thousands of lives if I didn't do it. But I still get stuck in the cycle of this level of peace that I owe no one nothing. And so I struggle with that. So I hear all these strategies like infinite banking, you know, IRAs, 401ks, all of these things. I'm trying to take a step back right now and say, is that the route that I go versus taking a large chunk of cash, doing what I know that I'm good at and making, you know, call it 20 to 33% returns every year. Now, a lot of that's in taxable ways, but I have tax strategy that I play with for that in other ways. Yeah. So how could infinite banking help my position?
Really having that liquid cash, right? I think that's the biggest thing. Because, I mean, the important part for people to understand is that everything's about stewardship, because there's spenders and savers that people always talk about, right? You know, Dave Ramsey always poo-poos all over the spenders, right? And it's true. You give them debt, they'll blow it. Savers, they're scared of debt, right? They like, just even mention the word debt freaks them out because they can never pay off their debt fast enough. Even when they are debt free, they can't save enough, right? They just keep hoarding money and it never feels like enough. Those are both scarcity emotions, right? Those are both scarcity perspectives of money. A steward kind of thinks more like what you're talking about, Tiffany, which is, it's like, you know, I don't want to just go blow money. I know that money is meant to be used because I know I'm born with nothing. I leave this planet with nothing. Everything in between that I have here is stewardship. Money, talents, gifts, everything. How am I going to use it the best way possible to not just, you know, create more, but multiply my assets, right? Multiply my stewardship. How do I serve more people with that? And so infinite banking, from my perspective, right? I know there's a lot of guys that are like all about leveraging the crap out of this thing. I don't do that. I first and foremost, I keep a certain amount of money in there that I never touch. It's so like, for example, like my wife wants 400 grand. There's $400,000 in cash that says, hey, this is just for a family household. Not even including the business reserves, right? But just for the household. She's like, this is money I just never want to touch. Don't invest it. Don't do anything with it. But sitting in the bank earning 0.1% doesn't excite me. You know, even our high yield savings account, 3.5%, it's not great when I get taxed on it. But when I can keep it at 6%, so I told her, I was like, let's keep 300 grand that's earmarked inside our infinite banking, earning 6%, that's 18 grand a year versus making, you know, maybe $400 a year that we get taxed on, and then make $100 still on the bank account too. You know, so now we're making more, keeping it safer, keeping it protected as well. I can still access it whenever I want. Anything above that is free game to leverage. Now, here's what I do first. From my perspective, because I'm with you, like I don't like to use debt willy-nilly, you know, and use it unwisely. If I'm going to use it, I want to make sure I'm using it in a way that I know is going to create returns. And so
I'm a big believer in debt to create so I want to make sure I frame this really clear on our podcast, that I'm a big believer in debt to buy either a cash flowing asset or start a business or invest into a company. I actually had someone randomly comment on a post of mine yesterday or 2 days ago or something and was like, it was interesting because the post had nothing to do with this, but he said, hey, you know, I've been on one of your trainings, and he was very respectful in it. And he was just like, you know, 99% of America, if they did your system, would either have to like take out a loan or go into debt. And you're essentially like he's saying, are you putting people in a bad position? And I'm like, that's an interesting way to think, because I rewinded back to my story and I'm like, I had nothing as well. And so I took out a few loans in the beginning, but that's the difference between someone who follows a system and doesn't follow a system. When I think when debt is bad to invest into a company or an asset is when you take it out and try to figure it out on your own. And I think that's where it gets dangerous, because in your mind, you're thinking like, oh, I hear about this on this podcast or this YouTube or these, you know, whatever, free courses. And they go take this money, and even when it comes to probably your strategy, someone might go try to figure it out. And it just doesn't work. And I'm like, yeah, that's when debt's bad, when you decide not to follow a system. And so I just want to make sure that the audience understands I'm a big believer in debt. But when it comes to my personal future of retirement, I struggle because like my house, for example, is a 3% interest loan, but today I could pay it off. So I'm like, why am I not paying it off? I don't want to even look at a bill. But I don't know if it's because I'm like traumatized from having nothing growing up. So I'm trying to like really restructure my mindset around leverage moving on to the next stage of my life. And I'm in a different stage of legacy. You know, I could choose not to work for the rest of my life today if I wanted. Now I'm not going to do that because I wouldn't have no purpose. But Like how can I double or triple my money faster while leaving a legacy for my kids without feeling this like sense of scarcity that my money is locked up in something that I can't touch. And so I don't know if anyone listening to this relates to that, but it's like there's this fear inside of me of like, oh, but if it's in that, is it really mine? Like, can I pull it out? And I think that's why I've feared the IRAs and whatnot, which I finally overcame that this last year. Even though I know it's an amazing strategy, I'm well educated in it. I'm like, there's just something inside of me that's like, why am I scared to take that step?
Well, it's because the IRA money is not yours. That's the problem with IRAs and 401ks, right? You become the benefactor, and it's not really your money. It's the government's money, but then you're the benefactor. It's in your name. And
Even
that's why.
self-directed?
Even self-directed, because remember the rules, you don't get to determine the rules of those accounts. If they change the rules, you have to go with it. If they say it's no longer 59.5 before you have that 10% penalty gone, it's now 62, you have to go with it, right? The minimum age withdrawal, it used to be 70.5, now it's 72 after COVID, right? But they could change that number whenever they want. That's why like it is kind of locking your money up in prison. But I mean, self-directed is still better because at least you're able to direct it where you want instead of gambling it in the stock markets. But it's still under government control, right? That's one reason I do put more money in my life insurance because I don't have to worry about that because the government, whatever the rules are when I buy the policy, it's a contract. That's what it is at that moment. So if they even change the rules, if they say, hey, we're not going to make it tax-free anymore, it doesn't matter. Mine's tax-free. They have to go with those rules as grandfathered. With IRAs, you're not grandfathered. You have to go with whatever the rules are at that time, right? So there's some of those things. Not saying that IRAs are not bad, like you can't use them, but if I want to have financial freedom sooner than 59.5, I'm not going to lock up an IRA where I have to wait till I'm 59.5 to touch it or whatever age they tell me down the road.
Yeah, and I'm 39, so I think that's why I've been cautious with too much in my IRA because of that.
Yeah, exactly. You want liquidity like I do.
Yeah, so obviously you probably, where I'm just guessing, work with a lot of clients who have a decent net worth. And I'm just curious, this is more like going towards mindset because I just happened to get off like a bunch of mindset calls the last few days with some folks. I always, at every dinner I go to at a mastermind, I look around the table and most people tend to have a decent amount of money. And I look at them and I say, I'm just curious, like, I want to go around the table. When is enough enough? Like, at what point, like, what are you chasing at this point? And is it just a game and it's fun? Is it once you have so much money, is it just like a sense of purpose? Is it truly leaving a legacy? I know we say that word, but like, are you actually focused on that part? Or is it that you're trying to prove something? I'm just curious, like, what do you see as the bigger picture of why people want to do this strategy? And like, what do you see across people with higher net worths in general?
Ooh, that's a big question to unpack. Because they're kind of this. There's some crossover, but they are different. I mean, for most people, they just like the fact that they have control of their money, they have leverage, right? Like if I look at it as like a tax-free high yield savings account, if I look at it just like that, it's pretty cool. The fact that it's protected from lawsuits of creditors, especially as you grow your estate, even better, right? Because you want that protection. From an estate planning standpoint, that's another thing too. There's a lot of people that will buy this just purely to have tax-free money going to their estate where everything else, it could get taxed, especially if you start to grow your net worth at this point over 30 million as a couple, because you can pass on with no estate tax up to about 30 million. Anything above that, it's like 45%, right? So a lot of people use life insurance to basically pay off the tax bill, that kind of thing. But, to your point about why people do stuff, and maybe you've seen this too, I've realized that a lot of us driven successful people is almost what they're running away from versus what they're running to. And it surprised me just how often it is. I mean, how many times I'll meet guys in the real estate space, they're like still trying to prove to their father that's passed away, trying to prove that they're valuable to their father who's not even on the planet anymore, right? People that are just trying to run away from poverty, like just don't want to be there again. I mean, I spent 4 or 5 years in a trailer park, and I didn't know what it meant when kids said, are you waiting for a flood? I was like, well, I live in Oregon. So of course, like it's raining all the time. Didn't realize they were actually ripping on me, and that kind of stuff. So, those kind of things like can affect you growing up. And it's really good to introspect on that because if you do start to heal those parts of you, you realize that you're trying to prove something or try to prove value worth. I'll tell you, for me, that was my early mistake back in 2006 was that understand this: money is a magnifier of your soul. It only makes you more of who you already are. So when I was a financial advisor, I didn't feel much value, right? Especially because I, I thought I was pretty much worthless. Like I was still a very broke mindset, very scarcity mindset. I started to break free from that, and then money started to really come in as I was doing real estate investing and other things as well. I mean, I was able to retire when I was 28. As I was starting to do that, um, instead of just trying to figure out how to build a legacy, I was focused around of how to prove my worth. And I would do that because I remember the first thing I did is I bought the Mercedes, right? And then after that, I bought my dream home. And I even told the realtors, we're looking at different houses. I said, listen, I want something when people walk in and say, wow, and so found a show home, bought it. That time was only like $600,000. I mean, boy, I wish I had those prices now, right? But
I know.
it'd be worth well over $1 million today. But, I bought it, in 2006 because like money was just coming in. It was like air. You never count the number of breaths you have when it's abundant. It's only when that's taken away, you start counting the number of breaths. It's the same thing with money. And so I was buying some of these things, and I wasn't being crazy with it either, because remember, I still have my dad's voice in my head, kind of like yours, which is like, don't have debt, don't go excessive. I mean, I was starting to learn to be open to leveraging debt in smart ways. But I was still like, don't you do that. Like, that's bad. You just save, save, save. You hoard money, right? So I was kind of doing a quasi Dave Ramsey mixed with a little Kiyosaki, which just don't work really well.
Yeah.
Because I started like throwing money into my house as equity, right? I started like dumping that money in there saying, oh, it's okay because I'm a mortgage broker. If I ever need equity, I'll just get a HELOC or pull it out. I just get I'll just get a cash out refi because, they'll give loans to anybody right now. Of course, in 2007, mid 2007, when I went to do it, because all of a sudden money was starting to tighten up, especially as I was launching a new business with some partners. All of a sudden I couldn't get to it because the banks are saying, sorry, we just stopped lending to business owners anymore. And that's when all of a sudden the real estate prices started tanking, was when they started locking up the credit markets. I had all this equity disappeared like that, right? And so I learned why I was being liquid. And the crazy thing is, with the things I had, pretty soon I'm turning in my Mercedes. I literally turned into the dealership and said, you're going to take it from me anyways. No need to send the repo guy. Here you go. Take it. Eventually, I foreclosed my house in 2009, 1 week before my fourth child was born, which was awesome. So I had to pay the guy $2,000 to stay in for 2 more weeks so we can at least have the baby and then move out postpartum, and all that kind of stuff. What's crazy, Tiffany, is that once I lost almost everything, other than the minivan, we had to keep that. But once I had lost everything pretty much, that's when I realized I had everything. Because everything was stripped away, like the house, the car, and everything. I had to ask myself, am I less valuable because I don't have these things? And for a while, my ego was dying, right? It was having this horrible ego death, because I was having to come to terms with the fact that I'm not going to teach about passive income anymore because I'm not out of the rat race, so I can't teach that. I did start teaching people how to find and free up cash flow, and that started to take a life of its own, and that actually helped pull me out of the debt that I had. I didn't go bankrupt, but man, it would have been easier if I did, because paying $1 million back kind of sucks. But like all that happened, that occurred. Now, like, I'm not attached to the stuff. I don't care. Like, the stuff is meaningless to me. It's like, sure, I want, a car to drive around, but I have so many friends that have nicer cars than me that make less money than I do. And I just don't care, because it's not, my ego doesn't need it anymore. I don't care about having a big house. I literally have a big house because we have 8 kids. But not because I want. I can't wait to downsize to get out of it.
Man.
Well, blended family.
I was asking for a third, and I'm like, man.
It's hard, man. I'll tell you. Well, once you have a bunch of them, it's like a chain gang. You just chain them all together and put them to work. So it's fine. But no, like that kind of stuff. Like it's. I know we're kind of getting more philosophical with it, but it's true. I find a lot of real estate investors that are really running away from something. And there's an ego thing that's there. There's voices, past voices that are speaking to you from the dead almost. And you got to figure out how to heal that trauma to then look for something better. And it doesn't mean that you don't lose that motivation to do things, but it does mean that instead of trying to run away from something, what are you shooting towards? For me, it's about stewardship. It's the reason I call my company Money Ripples is because that ripple effect you can create in people's lives, right? Because as I gain more money, I realized I had more power. It's a magnifier of my soul. How can I do more good with the money that I have? How can I help more people become free? How can I essentially bless more lives with the money that I have? I don't have to give to a charity necessarily. I mean, that's not bad, but how can I use my voice? How can I use my company and my mission and what I'm doing to help bless more lives and create a ripple effect that lasts generationally beyond me? So that's why I believe is like stewardship. It's not just my money. How would I use my time, my talents, my energy, all the things that I can offer in a way that can bless as many lives as I can while I'm on this planet?
I get the question all the time from people around, how do I know who to hire for help, whether it's consultants, coaching, whatever. And one of my stipulations for anyone that I personally hire is they've had to have lost it all at some point, because one, I'm hiring you to learn what not to do. And I just don't feel like you have perspective on life and strategy, how to handle money or conflict or problems and come out of it if you haven't already been through some type of loss. And so I would like, that's probably my biggest recommendation. So I like to hear that there's some level of like, you've already gone through this and this is why you've created it. Because I think that's important. I have a couple friends that sell like life insurance and financial advising and all this stuff, but I'm like, you've never even had like any level of hardship to tell me what to do with this kind of money. Nor have you ever been in like my business owner shoes, or, I don't know. I struggle with that a little bit.
Yeah.
Is there a way that people do infinite banking the wrong way? Like if they're not educated correctly, and what can happen if they do it wrong? Like, is there people out there that try to figure it out? What do they try to do? I'm just curious.
Yeah, there's a few different myths and things out there. Like one common myth you'll hear from a lot of guys, even in the real estate space teaching infinite banking, they say buy your cars with it or buy your houses with it and things like that. I don't do that. Going back to our debt conversation, if I can get leveraged loan debt from the bank at, say, like for example, 2 years ago, we were in a pretty bad car accident, totaled our car, and we're going in to buy a new one, and as I'm looking, I'm like, I could buy it in cash outright. But I realized I said, well, what kind of financing programs do you have? They're like, oh, we can give you 3.9% for 3 years. I'm like, cool, done. Right. Because I would rather do that, get that financing from the bank. Any money that I can get cheap from a bank, especially if I can use it in a way that's going to be used productively, much better, especially if I can use that money elsewhere that I would have used for cash. So a lot of people with infinite banking, they've been taught, pay all your bills with it. Pay off your, pay for your cars using infinite banking, which by the way, if I'm getting a line of credit, say at 5% from the bank or from the life insurance company, why not just get it from the bank, money from the bank that's not mine, not leveraging my own cash. I can just get it from the bank that's from their pocket instead without any using in my infinite banking, so that my money's freed up to invest differently, right? So that's one thing I see people do, is that they're trying to buy everything with their infinite banking, and that's just not the case. I'll get a mortgage from the bank without using infinite banking. Now, for the down payment on a property, for example, yeah, I'll use infinite banking for the down payment, but I won't buy it all outright in cash using my infinite banking policy. I'll leverage the bank for cheap money as much as I can get. Even business loans, same thing. Now, if they're going to charge me 13, 15% or more, sure, I'll use my life insurance instead, right? Heck, I even bought solar. I financed solar. I said, hey, why not? It's cheap interest. But then once the promotional period is done, I use my infinite banking to pay off solar, and then I just paid back to the bank that way, right? And there's lots of different strategies you can use. I would just say this is that you don't have to use it daily for almost like bill pay. That's a strategy taught by insurance salesmen. Like you said, most of these guys don't even know how to invest themselves. They're literally just salesmen in suits, right? Or polo shirts, whatever they wear. They're like Jake at State Farm, But these guys, like really, like they're trying to tell you to do this stuff because they make bigger commissions the bigger you do it in. I had one real estate investor that is in one of the other mastermind groups that I've been in, and he was told by this guy to throw in $750,000 up front, then pay like $250,000 a year thereafter. He says, Chris, what do you think about the strategy? And I said, well, tell me more about your cash flow situation. And he started telling me about it. I said, you know what? If you do that $750,000 up front, the problem is the bigger money you throw in up front, the bigger the insurance policy has to be with bigger costs. The same percentage comes out whether you put in $250,000 or $750,000. And the thing is, the insurance agent gets paid the most on that first year. I told him, I was like, instead of running up those costs, why don't we just do $250,000 or $300,000 a year total as a max contribution? By the way, that's a max. The minimum you can pay is like a fifth of that. I was like, why don't you do that instead? Bring down the cost. You'll make a better ROI on your money versus trying to throw it all in. He makes more money, but you don't. So don't do that. So that's another thing too, is like sometimes I've been taught, especially in the real estate space, to dump in tons of cash up front and then, pay little down the road, that just runs up. It just drives up that death benefit higher and higher to make the cost more and more. I like to make it to where it's like lowest death benefit needed to allow whatever amount of cash you're going to pay in as a max contribution limit. And that's what we go for.
There's a lot of fear mongering going on right now throughout all of social media around the future. And, we'll see what happens with the Fed chair. I am getting a little nervous with seeing what's happening in the banking system. I'm just curious, like, what's your take on what could happen in the next 12 to 24 months?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to always predict, right? Because I'll tell you one thing. I've had a lot of experience in the stock market. I don't trade the stock market anymore, but I watch it like a hawk. I'll tell you, like right now, the stock markets are ridiculously high. The other thing that's happening too, because what's driving up that stock market beyond just a lot of speculation is also a lot of debt. There's a lot of people leveraging debt to put in the market. Whenever there's excessive leverage of debt anywhere, you've created a bubble that's about to burst. And when you have financial institutions, especially doing the lending, and if they ever loosen up their lending guidelines, here's the crazy thing. The feds talk out of both sides of their mouth, don't they? I mean, they say they don't want inflation. They're trying to fight inflation. But what are they doing on the back scenes? They're driving more money into the banking system. So they were starting to cut it off, but now that's coming back up again. And people are thinking like, oh yeah, they're fighting inflation. No, they're not. They're actually driving it more.
Correct.
But they're telling us they're fighting it. So the question is, okay, why do they feel the need to keep pumping more money into the banking system? Why would they do that? That to me just shows that maybe they're seeing something in the banking system, that there's cracks forming that they should be worried about. Bond market is actually that's really close to a collapse if anything bad goes wrong. We've got that issue going on that nobody really talks about. We do see banks that, of course, are in this situation where there's also consumer debt that people are, of course, doing cash out refinances because at least the equity went up. So that those that had assets are able to do so. Those that don't have assets that are renting have nowhere to go. They're just running out of cash. And pretty soon you're going to see the people that did have the assets going to run out of cash soon. A lot of people put money in crypto. We've seen that tank recently, right? So I see that.
What do you think Trump's agenda is? Do you think it's to collapse banking or keep banking going?
I don't know if Trump knows, honestly. I mean, like, he's a smart guy. And, but some of the things that he's trying to do is, I think what he's trying to do is earn political favor, unfortunately. I don't think he wants to get those rates down because he wants to make people happy, right? It's kind of like when I was in 6th grade, we all voted for the guy that said he was going to promise us chocolate milk, even though he had no power over it, but he's like, I'm going to make sure we all get chocolate milk instead of just plain old milk. And we're like, yay, vote for Zach, And so we did. And he became a 6th grade president and we didn't get chocolate milk. I think that's what Trump's kind of doing right now, is that he's playing the game, the tariff game and everything else. And that's jumping around and everything else. And so he's just trying to, I think, win favor, because if he can help figure out a way, that's why he's backing off on the tariffs, because he keeps driving up inflation. The Feds aren't going to lower rates, right? So he's trying to find different ways to do it. The bond market's really the thing that drives the Feds, not the other way around. That's one thing that most people don't realize, that the Feds follow the bond market. So if you watch the 10-year Treasury yield, watch that. Then you can predict what the Feds will do. The Feds don't dictate the bond market. The bond market dictates them. And the bond market right now is kind of holding steady. It's not dropping right now. So when people are like, oh, they're going to drop more rates, well, the bond market says otherwise. Like, they probably won't. And that just pisses off Trump, right? Because naturally, if the bond rates don't come down, then that doesn't work either. So the only way to do that is obviously the strengthening the dollar, things of that nature, which I don't know. I don't think Trump's doing anything to help with that, really. If anything, he's probably doing the opposite. And the Feds are doing the kind of same thing. Really, what we're seeing is what could be deflation, but they're trying to fight it with by adding more inflation. So they're driving prices up still, which is why we still see markets going up. Real estate, sort of. Stocks are definitely going up, or have been going up for the last year or two. So I think that's the big issue you're running into right now, is that you're going to see the Feds just not do anything. They're going to kind of stay put until either things finally show up with unemployment. We're seeing lots of that right now. That's the biggest issue, is more unemployment stuff, because hiring freezes. And I know I've seen it in our community too. People are like, either have already let people go, especially in the real estate community, because we got hit first, and or we're just not hiring more people. We're using AI instead and things like that. So there's I don't know. There's just a lot of things happening right now that the next 12 to 24 months, either we can head into more I wouldn't say hyperinflation, but higher inflation again, or we'll finally see this black swan event that finally just goes bam. And that's going to affect stocks. It's going to affect us in real estate. That's going to affect just about everything. Crypto, even people are like, oh, I'm going to do Bitcoin. No, people are going to be cashing their Bitcoin to get cash. That's why I don't think Bitcoin's safe. But the whole point is people have been using debt like crazy to go invest in Bitcoin. People have been using debt to go in the stock market. People have been using debt, even in crazy ways for real estate too. So I see that's been the big concern, even though I'm all about debt too, using it wisely. I think a lot of people have been using it unwisely. And at some point, just like the government can't keep pumping up more debt, the consumer won't either. I think at some point it's going to kind of come collapsing and come back into balance.
I mean, I've seen a lot of articles around like Trump wanting to take all currencies digital. And it's like, well, what happens to all the money sitting in the banking system?
Right.
And so I don't know, it concerns me a lot. And so I'm just seeing what everyone else's strategies are. And it makes sense because a lot of banks are like knocking down our doors to get deposits. And it's never been this way before with those phone calls. So I find that interesting.
Yeah, that's why I've been telling people, I think the bank stress is going to come more from the propensity of us not being able to pay them back. I think it's really is going to be on the debt side because they've loosened it a little bit more. Not as bad as 2008. It won't look like 2006 and post 2006. But I do see that there will be a lot of cracks in the system, especially around business. A lot of businesses have been leveraging debt. There's a lot of over AI hype, things like that. I think that will affect certain banks more than others. And we've seen like regional banks, there's been a lot of business fraud. We've seen that in regional banks like Zion's Bank, which is local to where I am. Their stock tanked like 25% when they realized like they had just been ripped off by a company that committed loan fraud. So I think we're going to see that stress out the banks, which is why I'm also unbanking myself, going more towards life insurance versus keeping a lot of money in the bank right now.
So I want to wrap this up. I really appreciate this topic. I think it's something that, in my opinion, most investors probably don't understand and need to get thoroughly educated on. And this is probably enough to like macro level understand the concept. Before I ask you one of my last questions, I'm just curious, how can people learn more with you? Can they follow you? Do you have something free to give them? Like, well, how can they get in front of you?
Yeah, you can follow anything that's Money Ripples, whether it's at Money Ripples on social media, moneyripples.com, Money Ripples podcast. We're actually in our 11th season right now. We've had it just aired our 1,000th episode a couple weeks ago. So
Nice.
feel free to follow us there. And you just released my new book, The Work Optional Blueprint, which became an Amazon bestseller. So that's also available too.
Since you deal with a lot of folks and you're always talking about money, which means you're probably in rooms with high net worth people, what's one controversial truth about wealth that people don't want to hear?
When you say people don't want to hear, what people are you referring to? There's different people, right?
Money. Or people that don't have money and think that they want it.
I would say a controversial truth. Probably one of the most controversial ones I've had recently that I've gotten the most comments about was kind of something we kind of flirted with a little bit earlier, which is like the 401k, especially those people that think the 401k with a match is going to work. Set and forget it, and eventually you'll live on 4% a year, that kind of stuff. I teach and prove all the time how 401ks don't work. Like even with a company match, even if you're an employee that gets 100% match, the 401k, the bad performance of it, and the match actually doesn't add that much. Long term, that 100% match only adds about a 3 or 4% return compounded over the course of your life. Not 100%. People are like trying to argue with me. It's like, well, go put in the calculator, put in 100 plus 8% in the market and see what your 10,000 a year will do after 20 years. I can guarantee you're not going to be richer than Bezos. No one ever said, oh, I got rich off my 401k, right? Or my IRAs. Nobody ever says that. They got rich first and foremost from one, investing in themselves, in their businesses, things in real assets like real estate. Those are the two places that you'll find more self-made millionaires than anywhere. And even controversial with that, like debt, like I'll hear like a lot of wealthy people say, yeah, you should get debt free. Yeah, you did that after, right? So many times you hear wealthy people talk about what they've done after the fact. Like when you talked about, you're like, yeah, I used debt, I leveraged debt early on. But a lot of times you get wealthy people say, oh yeah, well get debt free. That's what they all do. No, they don't. They didn't do that in the beginning. They had to leverage it with every other person.
Debt to get there. Yep.
Exactly. And then they say, oh, now I have more enough cash that's burning a hole in my pocket. Now I'll pay off my debt. And they're like, yeah, it's free to, that's what you should do. No, it's like different phases. And that's what people don't realize. There's different phases and stages that people go through, just like playing a video game, right? Like you're going to pick up different weapons along the way to make you stronger and stronger. Same thing with money too.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I've this year more than ever, and I think it's just because I'm in a new stage of life, is I've really paid really close attention to my circle. I have a lot of friends that have exited companies for 100 million plus,
Mhm.
and I've paid close attention to them and some of my mentors and who's married, who's divorced, who's happy, who's having issues. And I've just been like watching and reflecting this year, saying, I'm capable of a lot of things. I'm definitely an intelligent female. I've got 2 kids, and that battle of like, how much time do I put in my life of nurturing and being at home, and then how much time do I go after these big ambitions internally? And so I've really reflected on what is it going to fulfill either way that I go, and what position will it put me in closer to just always continuing to be happy. And I only say that because I've had a lot of mentors over the last few years that have helped me make a lot of money, but I don't know if I would consider them happy. And I only know that because they've been divorced multiple times, and you watch them on stage, and I can understand their body language and all that. And so I think that that's why I always ask the question, like, when's enough enough? What are you actually chasing? What genuinely makes you happy? And then go find the strategies that fit within that and ignore the rest. So anyways, love talking about money and philosophy surrounding it and all that. So I appreciate it. Again, follow him at moneyripples.com, right? And you have a podcast as well as Money Ripples on IG. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining the show. I really appreciate it.
It's been an honor. Thanks, Tiffany.